Welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm Kathleen Walter. Joining us now is Mideast and terrorism expert Dr. Walid Phares. Dr. Phares is a congressional advisor and the co-secretary general of the Transatlantic Legislative Group on Counterterrorism. He is the author of several books on terrorism, including The Confrontation: Winning the War Against Future Jihad. And Dr. Phares, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me today.
Well, Yemeni officials announced that that country's security forces had broken up several plots by al-Qaeda militants which aimed to blow up oil pipelines and take control of key cities. But according to published reports, the government is now distancing itself from those initial claims. What do you make of this? And do you believe the Yemenis when they say that they indeed foiled these plots?
Look, the Yemeni government is really confronting al-Qaeda inside Yemen. But the difference with the U.S. campaign against al-Qaeda is that they would only fight al-Qaeda if it's fighting them. If there is a plot against other than Yemenis in Saudi Arabia and Somalia or against the United States, then the Yemeni government will try to do its best, but not really in coordination all the time with its allies. So what we need to see happening is a coordination, strategic coordination between the United States and the Yemenis as one integrated strategy against al-Qaeda to get real results. So in the beginning, you may have claims by the government, the Yemeni government, that they have disrupted many plots, and then when we intervene and try to ask questions, then the version could change.
Dr. Phares, why does this report have the State Department and now the West so rattled? And is the State Department wise to focus on Yemen as the central source of the current threat?
There are two reasons for why the State Department or the government in general focus on Yemen. Reason number one is the actual data, the input, communications between Zawahiri out of Pakistan, most likely, and the command of al-Qaeda in Yemen. And in that conversation, there were talks and information about plots, about raids, about attacks waged by a network that is now operational in Yemen. That's reason number one. Reason number two is that al-Qaeda in Yemen has a very far reach, not just in the Arabian Peninsula and in Africa, but as we saw with the previous commander who was killed by the U.S., Anwar al-Awlaki, they have reached inside the United States. So these are the main reasons for why we're focusing on Yemen. But let me add quickly, Yemen is not the only network for al-Qaeda. It's one of the most sophisticated, but there are many, many al-Qaeda branches across Africa and the Middle East. We're talking about the return of al-Qaeda to Iraq, and we see it very active in Syria.
The recent closures of U.S. embassies across the Middle East and North Africa, does this suggest that the Obama administration's claims of al-Qaeda's retreat and demise are premature?
Indeed, the claim that al-Qaeda is on the run, on the path of decline, those claims basically have been verified by a U.S. decision to shut down 22 embassies, but verified as not real. I mean, these claims have been probably in 2011, 2012, raised as a result of the killing of bin Laden and then of al-Awlaki. And of course, for political reasons, we were in a presidential campaign time. But now is the time for reality. And reality is that al-Qaeda today in 2013 is much bigger, much larger, much more sophisticated, and has more members, not just the central al-Qaeda, but also the branch of al-Qaeda in many countries around the world. A quick tour will take us from Pakistan and Afghanistan, where it's still operational, to Yemen. We just mentioned Yemen, into Somalia, into Mali, into many countries in the Sahara, Africa. And let's not forget Benghazi and, of course, Tunisia, southern Tunisia. And now the Egyptian army is fighting al-Qaeda in northern Sinai. That's pretty new, in addition to Syria, Iraq, and of course the sleeper cell inside the West. That's pretty big of al-Qaeda.
So, Dr. Phares, is it fair to say that there's a resurgence of radical Islam in the Mideast and in the North Africa that threatens, not only U.S. interests, but also Israel?
I don't think this is a comeback, as some would try to frame it. These are the ballistics of al-Qaeda. It has never stopped. The jihadi movement has never stopped recruiting, indoctrinating. So if we do not stop the ideology, because the ideology is the industry, is the factory, then they're going to continue to come in waves. Younger age, more sophisticated, more educated, and more daring, if I may say. So at this point in time, there is a rise, a maximum rise of the jihadists across the region.
You talk about stopping the ideology, but yet we've learned of yet another U.S.-led drone strike which killed 6 al-Qaeda militants in Yemen's eastern province. This was the 6th such drone strike in Yemen in the last 2 weeks. Now the Obama administration continues defending this policy, saying that drones are America's best bet against al-Qaeda. Is killing bin Laden, withdrawing U.S. troops from the region, and ramping up drone strikes a viable anti-terror policy?
No, it is not. Droning al-Qaeda is part of an overwhelming campaign that should have been waged years ago, at least in the last 4 to 5 years ago, when we withdrew from Iraq without having an alliance with an Iraqi force that would be civil society to block al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is coming back. The Iranians are even coming back to Iraq. When we withdraw from Afghanistan, if we don't have allies on the ground from civil society, from the armed forces who will block al-Qaeda, al-Qaeda will expand again. So at the end of the day, the drones are a tactical weapon. They're not a strategic weapon. When we kill a leader or activist or militant, they are immediately replaced. Replaced by what? By individuals who are recruited and indoctrinated. So the factory is what we should be working on. And the factory is the ideology. And how to do that, we need to have a different policy from what Washington is doing right now under this administration. Washington is not even recognizing that there is a doctrine, that there is an ideology.
And why do you think that is? It seems that the Obama administration is really reluctant to come out and use words like radical Islam and even terrorism.
Because the foundation of this administration's foreign policy and national security have been that the previous foreign policy was wrong. The previous foreign policy had identified an ideology. So when in 2008, during the presidential campaign, and again last year, the president said that this war is going down, that we are not fighting an ideology. These are foundations of a policy. So if you want to change it, you are changing the foundations of your policy. This is where Washington should be looking at right now, to admit that the past foreign policies were wrong. We need to change them. We need to reform them. That decision was not yet made in Washington.
Now, in reference to the recent embassy closures, the Obama administration revealed that they were tipped off to a terror plot after intercepting that phone call that you talked about between al-Qaeda chief Ayman al-Zawahiri to an al-Qaeda leader in Yemen. Now, in an interview with Newsmax this week, Ambassador John Bolton told us that by revealing so much information, the administration could actually be aiding the enemy. Do you agree with the ambassador here?
I do agree that by declaring in public the entire, measure system that we are going to apply, we are telling the enemy, the foe, the terrorists, what are our measures. I would have gone with an alternative strategy. I would have basically made sure that our embassies are secured, increased security, ask the armies and the security agencies of the countries where these embassies are to provide a much wider belt around those embassies. And at the same time, basically, stop visitation. When you stop the visitations, the visiting process to the embassies, you are stopping the terrorists. There are no more terrorists who can come to those embassies. But the one thing you don't do is to declare out loud that we are shutting down 22 embassies and consulates, because that is going to send a message to al-Qaeda, to other jihadists, that it is only a discussion and information between leaders by al-Qaeda that compelled the United States to shut down its diplomatic system. That would encourage them for the next round and the next round.
Dr. Phares, last question for you is on a separate but related topic. How do you view President Obama's decision to cancel his trip to Moscow after Russia's decision to grant Edward Snowden asylum? And are you concerned that this now chilly relationship could hurt U.S. interests in fighting the war on terror, considering Russia's strategic relationships with both North Korea and Iran?
Look, the issue of meeting or not meeting between two presidents is not about personal decisions. It's about relationships and strategies. Our entire web of relationship with Russia is not going well for the last few years. When George Bush and Putin, and before that, previous Russian leaders since the end of the Cold War, when they sat down, the American position was very well defended, and the Russian leadership respected that. We did not see many infringement by Russia against the United States in those years. Now, for some reason, actually, we see that Russia or the Russian leadership is not taking seriously American national or national security interests, and it prompted what has happened in the Snowden affair.
All right, Dr. Walid Phares, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for watching Newsmax TV. Bye.